All right. The Great Judgment, the Glory of Kings. So Michael and I have been doing a little bit of a journey here together on this teaching series. We suspect we're somewhere around 3, maybe 4 parts on this, Michael.
It was meant to be 3 parts, and part 1 became 2 parts. So I'm resigned to it being 4.
Well, it was half a part at first. No, it's interesting. For those who don't know, this series kind of came out of again, like a lot of the things that I'll go back to be the fires of my life, but then continuing in the discipleship journey and then into some of the swims. And then Michael and I were doing some swims on this, and we decided in the end, you know what, let's get this and take it a bit wider to the community. And so the Ruach's led us to put together this and to share it with you. So, we continue on together in this journey with you in the wider community, and hopefully it'll be a blessing to you. We had said earlier in the teaching, didn't we, Michael, that sort of when you talk the great judgments of the Bible, and we're looking at this chiastic structure within the menorah and whatnot, when we come to the end, to the great white throne judgment, at least from a linear perspective, where as far as we can go in the time domain on what we can reasonably actually seek out, that the Father may have hidden these pearls, these understandings within the time domain. And once we get to the great white throne judgment, that's it. We're going to be drawing blank. We're really in imagination and conjecture land after that. We can speak up to this point and seek the Father for revelation, understanding, uncover these things, do these sorts of things. But really, if we try and get beyond that great white throne judgment, we're drawing blanks unless we're liars. What say you?
Well, I will quote Paul in this instance. No eye has seen or ear heard what lays in store for those who love him. Like that's all we've got, really. I mean, we can speculate. We can maybe catch an analogy of it, like a glimpse, but that's it at best.
He does make the point, though, for those of us in repentance that are seeking to know him, he does reveal the hidden things. And so the hidden things, but that's speaking from a time domain perspective. So the hidden things within the time domain perspective is a lot of what, a series like this, and we're looking at certain things. And the key thing is for us not to stray away from the foundation of the command upon command to stay in this place, to have the biblical framework of the Moedim, the understanding, what we see contained in the Torah, all of the Tanakh, and of course the testimony of it all in the Brit Hadashah in the New Testament, to bring this all into a space where, he wants us to search a matter out. And so we're going to continue to look at that in this way. So today we've got the glory of kings. I'll get you to read this, Michael.
There's a story behind every person. There's a reason why they're the way they are. Think about that before you judge someone.
Okay. I have no idea where this quote came from, but I like it. I don't know the driver, the context behind this, but I suspect it's somebody who's been mistreated, maybe has not been shown mercy and understands. Somebody who has experienced that not, and of course, can see some of the hypocrisy, the self-righteousness, the folly in such a position while we're all in the human state. Now, from the Father's position, he is set apart, he is holy, he is pure. There is no judgment which is hypocritical from his position. There is no judgment that is incorrect. So the issue then is from that pure position, and what Michael and I are going to sort of, steer as we walk through this, is what we're trying to do is to sort of say, okay, but there is this sense that we have a righteous king on the throne. And so even though he is 100% correct, even though he is 100% holy and pure and set apart, how is he applying judgment from that perspective? And so we're in a position right now where we're nowhere near that, but we're acting like we are. And this can be a bit of folly. And so we need to understand this. What say you, Michael?
Well, you've said quite often that Elohim is not asking us to do something that he hasn't already done himself. So you had this little title, Walking in the Shoes of Others. Well, our Messiah walked this earth. He became like his brothers and had to suffer like us so that he could become a compassionate and loving high priest. So there's this idea of, you're talking about Elohim's judgment. He's righteous, he's pure, but yet our Messiah actually experienced life here on earth. Is this maybe part of what gives his judgment credibility?
Well, we are going to explore a little bit more of this as we go through this series, because we really are getting up to the end of our conceivable ability to understand Revelation and his plan of redemption over the great 7,000-year or 7-day plan of redemption. And now that doesn't mean we can't get deeper in any aspect of this, okay? But what we're saying is we're going out to the end of the age with the discussions here. That doesn't mean that we have all things in the depth of understanding the end of the age, but we're going on a deeper dive, and we're having these more honest discussions. And these are the things that I believe has been set out before us, and so why we're doing this. Now, we spoke about the picture of the kahal, the 7-branch menorah. It says this: "Then I turned to see a voice that was speaking to me. And on turning, I saw 7 golden lampstands, and in the midst of the lampstands, one like a son of man, clothed with a long robe and with a golden sash around his chest." And so we've got this incredible picture that goes on in Revelation to explain that we are looking at what's representative of his kahal, of his people, his assembly. And as a part of this, we're seeing in the book of Revelation that there's going to be an overcoming component to each of these parts of his kahal. And these overcoming components will essentially light this incredible picture of the menorah. And the way that this is lit by the overcomers is that, according to scripture, there's a crushing that goes on. We're going to enter into the narrow gate, into the crushing of our lives, which of course is what produces olive oil. In ancient biblical thinking, in Hebraic thinking, they quite knew that the oil for lamps came from the crushing process. And this is why we see Messiah in the Garden of Gethsemane, the garden of crushing. So this incredible picture of the overcoming component of his kahal is actually the Ruach can come and light these things. And so it's quite incredible, this whole imagery. And so when you see that picture of the menorah burning and things like that, it's not just theatrical effect. It actually means something, from an imagery of understanding the overcoming perspective. Does that make sense, Michael?
Crystal.
Okay. So the chiastic structure of the menorah. Why are we doing that, Michael? What's going on here?
Oh, because it's a nice, pretty little picture. No, I'm kidding. Because right. Our Elohim is an Elohim of order, and he gives us these pictures. And when we can see the picture, he's trying to point to something. And again, you see this 7-branch menorah, and at the center is the focal point. And by understanding how the menorah, the branches link, you can start seeing not like a mirroring, but you can see how for example, the judgments here on one side are linked to their corresponding part on the other side.
Yeah. And so when we were, kind of having the discussions and the deeper dive on various aspects of this in the swim, what quickly unfolded was the whole chiastic nature or structure of this from a biblical judgments perspective, linking back to the kahal. So we're using the picture that the revelation of Messiah uses. We're not going to reinvent the wheel here. So that's basically why you're seeing this, is that we're just, Michael and I think that Messiah's way of describing and sharing these things for us to learn and understand was good enough for us. So we didn't see the need to change it. And so that's what's going on here. Okay, so we went through in part one, and we got up to the bridegroom as a part of this. So if you're going, we're doing the Hebraic thing. So we're going, we're going from the right to left. And so we got the 1, the 2, the 3. Now we're in the center or the middle here, which is a bridegroom judgment in these great biblical judgments. So we've gone up very high in the helicopter in looking at this. As such, or I guess if we were keeping in ancient terms, we're standing quite high up on the hill and we're looking down into this great plan of redemption that includes these great biblical judgments. Well, we get to the bridegroom. Now, what's interesting is that every component of the menorah is fashioned into the center component. Now, it's interesting that when we get to the 4th of the great biblical judgment, this one involves the actual, involves our Messiah, involves the bridegroom. And so this is now we shouldn't be surprised, but it's quite incredible that we see this. What do you think, Michael?
You know, who here has heard the old quib, if you put Messiah at the center of everything, you can't go wrong. But like, I think it really is true when Messiah is at the center of everything. And he's taking accountability, responsibility, and he's even paying the consequence. And this is what we're going to see with this particular judgment. But everything comes off of that. And this makes me think, you know, all these judgments, and it goes back to this point. It's his will, his desire, his dream. It's about him, not about us.
Yeah. Amen. All right. So I'll get you to read this. We're reading from the great messianic prophecies of the great prophet. In academia terms, they call them the major prophets, but they were, I don't really like those terms, minor and major prophets. That's basically just based on the actual size of the letters. But the great prophet Isaiah. I'll get you to read this here, Michael.
He was oppressed and he was afflicted, yet he opened not his mouth. Like a lamb that is led to the slaughter, and like a sheep that before its shearers is silent, so he opened not his mouth. By oppression and judgment he was taken away. And as for his generation, who considered that he was cut off out of the land of the living, stricken for the transgression of my people?
Now, our friends in modern day Yehuda, they really don't know what to do with this particular passage. This one's a bit of a bit of a problem, a bit of a spanner in the works, or a fly in the ointment. What do we do with this? And so often you'll find they skip over it. The midrash on this is limited by modern day Yehuda in many ways. It is evident and it's obvious, and it should have been evident and obvious, and it was to much of Yehuda and many of the people that were honoring from the nations afar that had been scattered, that were coming in to try and honor the Moedim. It was evident that Messiah was fulfilling these great prophecies from Isaiah. And so when we really understand it from a position of the Torah and the prophets, really those who really understood the word and had access to the word to the level that the religious Sanhedrin of the day in Yehuda had, with them, being tasked with carrying the scepter until the coming of Messiah. Really, Yeshua held them to account. You should know. And so this is one of these things. And of course, we're going to see a very interesting type of deception occurring upon the religious believers again at the end of this age with the coming of anti-Messiah. There's going to be a Messiah-like figure, and where he was rejected 2,000 years ago, the knowing ones, the religious ones, apparently are going to accept the wrong one. So we reject the right one, and then 2,000 years later, we accept the wrong one. Unbelievable. So this is what we do. So if the word doesn't become living, if it's just knowledge and it's dead, if it's just ink on paper or on lambskin or whatever it might be, and it doesn't become living, we can fall into this place of deception. Okay, in Matthew 16:21 says this, from the time Yeshua began to explain to his disciples that he must go to Jerusalem. So he's going to Jerusalem, and he's saying, suffer many things at the hands of the elders and the chief priests and the teachers of the law. Notice that Pilate's not in here, or the Roman soldiers. Who's he going to suffer at the hands of? It's very clear who is going to demand his execution, and it's not Rome. These are the true believers in the living Elohim. That just should be sobering to us. We think we've been here a million times before, haven't we? We think we know, but we don't. We don't know. We don't really know just how serious this actually was. It was not the unbelievers. It was the believers, the educated believers in the true God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Michael, is that sobering?
It is, especially when our Messiah says that essentially this will happen again. And we can't conceive of this because it's like, oh, well, you know, we worship Elohim, they worship Elohim. And we forget that when Elohim's truly not on the throne in one's life, and the hypocrisy that can bring about, it can bring about all manner of bad fruit. You know, we're warned in Scripture of bitter roots, and when you look at, you know, what a bitter root is, it's someone who has the knowledge of Elohim, but they don't heed counsel or reproof. Now, all of a sudden, the scope for being a bitter root has widened an awful lot. And this is exactly what, you know, Yeshua was reproving the religious authorities. You ought to know better. Either you humble yourself and accept that, or you react.
And so there's a willing position here that he's allowing, all right, that he must be put to death and be raised on the third day. So there's a position here. There's a judgment coming down on him on an innocent party by believers. So we're just making this point. This is the great biblical judgment of our bridegroom. Yet he's innocent. Yet the judgment is coming down, and he's going to willingly submit to this. This is a very important thing for us to understand, because on this whole picture that we're looking at here, he is the only innocent party of the great biblical judgments. Okay, everybody else is not. All right. So there's this chiastic menorah structure as it relates to the great biblical judgments has to be centered with the purchase here of something that a bridegroom is going to do. Okay, Mark 14:36, and he said, Abba, Father. So he's in the crushing. Okay. All things are possible for you. So he's accepting his humanity right now and saying, outside the time domain, creator of all things are possible for you. But in the position he was in the garden, he was subjecting and needed to subject himself to this judgment. Now, this is interesting. All things are possible, including what? Remove this cup from me. In other words, you could put a stop to this right now. I can't, but you can. So there's a real position where he's not cheating, as I put it, Michael. Messiah did not cheat in this moment. He's actually experiencing the flesh and everything that comes with it. But he's still acknowledging that which is outside the time domain can't actually do all things. Yet not what I will, from the position of the flesh. Okay, so there's for our sake, we're having this recorded. I am not cheating. It's basically what he's saying. There is a determined order of a judgment that's going to come down. He's going to accept this from an innocent position. But I will, what? But what you will. My position here, in a fallen state, in the flesh, yet innocent, does not change his will. The biblical judgment, which must come down, this price that's going to be paid. It is utter insanity if we understand the Torah to reject Yeshua Messiah. It's actually a blindness spiritually or a demonic deception or ignorance. You cannot reject this if you understand what the Torah is saying, what set apart holiness is, and the judgment we are going to face. You don't miss out. In the chiastic structure of the great biblical judgments, you don't miss number 4. This is folly. And anybody who's throwing away Yeshua Messiah in any movements right now upon this earth, walk away. They are being foolish. They are deceived. There is no other position. It's not even a conversation. You cannot take the Torah, and you cannot take the Brit Hadashah, and you cannot take the Ruach and dismiss Messiah. It's not possible. Michael, before we move on to the bride,
You
what
know,
say you?
Messiah says, if possible, remove this cup. And, I would argue this was the cup that we were supposed to have, that the adulterous bride was supposed to have. We read in Torah of the laws regarding a husband that's zealous for his wife and he suspects her of adultery, and she's to drink this cup of bitter waters that brings on a curse. And if it wasn't for Messiah, we would be drinking that cup, thus resulting in a death, a second death, not a physical death, because that's guaranteed, but a spiritual death. And our Messiah took that upon himself. And, again, the bridegroom dying for his bride, this is why Paul would say things like Messiah has, I want to phrase this carefully, Paul literally says that Messiah took this curse upon him. The curse of what? Of adultery. And again, like you said, Curtis, it's folly for anyone to deny Messiah, even just on a principle of Torah, because all have fallen short of it. And he was the innocent party in all this.
The word says that he died for the missing mark, the sin of mankind, both past, present, future. If you look at the chiastic structure here, and you look at the judgments upon man leading up to Messiah. So this is, past, present, future scenario, and it's coming along to the history of the plan of redemption. Then you hit Messiah, and now it's going to be that which is going to follow after him. So everyone under the structure is looking to Messiah. They were looking ahead before his coming, and we are honoring the fact that he has. And so now we're into these biblical judgments upon his house now, post the purchase of his people. And as a part of that, we've got a bridal component in here, don't we, Michael?
Yeah, we do.
And this is really interesting, understanding the great ancient structures of the Hebraic biblical model, because not only is he purchased his people, but there's something that's going to be purchased from her. And or out of the house, and so the earliest typologies, we saw that with Rebecca and Isaac, and right throughout Scripture, there's this incredible picture of something that's going to be pulled from her. So I'll get you to read this, and then we're back into the great prophet Isaiah 43, 5-7.
Fear not, for I am with you. I will bring your offspring from the east and from the west, and I will gather you. So this idea of the regathering of the scattered house of Israel. I will say to the north, give up, and to the south, do not withhold. Bring my sons from afar and my daughters from the end of the earth. Everyone who is called by my name, whom I created for my glory, whom I formed and made.
Ooh, now we get in this word glory in here. Now it's going to start to appear. Now think about what we're doing here today, the glory of kings. Something's going on here. So now that he's made the purchase, now that he's taken the judgment on our behalf from a sinless position, Now we're heading into the judgments that will follow. So is his righteousness, Michael, I'm going to ask you the question, albeit rhetorical, but for the same, is his righteousness increasing or decreasing at this point as a Elohim?
I would say it's always 100%, if that makes sense.
Fair enough. But as it's being laid out in the plan of redemption, right? He is literally showing us how righteousness is going to come about.
He's legitimizing it.
He is, completely. And this is the thing. We need to, he's working, he's taking full responsibility, accountability, and consequence for the creation. And he's laying this out in the great biblical judgments. And it's not him going, bad, you, bad, this, bad, bad. We've got this whole thing of, this Zeus Greek god throwing thunderbolts because people are acting poorly. We don't see it from a position of an Elohim who has created something, taken full accountability and consequence in order to legitimize and to teach us the very process of love. We do not have this position because religion has stolen it from you. Religious dogma and doctrines of demons have literally come in and gripped from the whore of Babylon on both sides of this river and has convinced you of something, has sown something a certain way, has misrepresented this to the world, and it is a lie. Every single one of these judgments are in love, for love, to teach us love, and will absolutely bring us to love. But we're going to have to learn what love looks like. And he's actually demonstrating this. Kavod, glory in the Hebrew, splendor, abundance, a weightier matter, glory. Look at this, Michael, reputation. Ooh, what's going on? The Greek equivalent of that is doxa. So what say you? What's that doing in there? I created for my kavod.
For my reputation, who is the glory of a man? It's the woman. Now, Elohim is saying that he's created a specific group of people for his glory. I would argue he's talking of his bride. We've got the physical type and shadow. Curtis, your wife carries your reputation with her. She carries your name. And Elohim is saying, these people are called by my name. I've created them for my glory. But what's really interesting, in the Septuagint equivalent of this passage, it uses the word doxa, and it has this idea of judgment, actually. So he's created a group of people for judgment.
What's going on? The point Michael's making here is exceptionally important. If anybody's ever experienced, is anybody here, hands up those who have experienced bad ambassadorship, or you've experienced the result of bad ambassadorship occurring on your behalf. So you've actually lived a process, right, where you're being misrepresented. This is why it's such an important part of the covenant. This is not, and so the point that Michael's making in the husband and wife shadow picture is that is the most intimate form of ambassadorship in the human experience in the time domain. So it's teaching us this thing. So when a man's wife is taking on his name, this is a big deal. This is a big deal. Well, with us as the bride of Messiah, this is a big deal. Okay, this is not a game. So ladies, you can go, well, I don't mind misrepresenting my husband's name because I don't care because he's a bozo. Well, okay, you can play whatever game you want. But if this is the shadow picture of the bride of Messiah to Elohim, this is not a game. We are representing his house. And so we are learning this picture. Well, oh no, I represent his house just fine, Curse, but I disgrace my husband when he's not around. Really, daughter of Messiah. And you think that's getting past the goalkeeper here? The goalkeeper is Yeshua, HaMashiach. He doesn't let anything in the past him. Do you think you're fooling him by misrepresenting your shadow picture and then coming to him with your prayers? Do you know that scripture warns about, Michael, that we can hinder our prayer life based on how we are actually treating his truths in our shadow pictures?
Our prayers can be hindered by how we treat our spouses. Peter makes it very clear that husband and wife are to walk in one accord, lest their prayers be hindered.
Yeah. And so it goes both ways. And we're seeing a world right now that is destroying the sanctity of this shadow picture for us to understand. Could this actually help us to understand this thing, this glory that's going to start to pop up here? What is going on? For since we believe that Yeshua died and rose again, even so through Yeshua Elohim, we'll bring with him those who have fallen asleep. Whoa, we're starting to get we're pointing to a Moedim here on something that's very interesting. So Paul's talking here in Thessalonians. What's going on here, Michael? What Moedim might this be?
Yom Teruah.
Yeah. So he's speaking within the framework, which was very normal, very natural to them. For we declare to you by the word of the master that we who are alive and those who are left until the coming of the master will not precede those who have fallen asleep or who have passed away. This is the first resurrection. He's referring to this. They're going to head to the Bema Seat. And literally, when it comes to the great fulfillment of Yom Teruah, I've got the caption there, dying to get there. This is literally, we will go through the process. So even those who are alive at the moment that we have the trumpets go and the fulfillment of Yom Teruah occurring, it's a body dropping dead. It is given to man to die, but once. We will all do this. So whether you die in a twinkling of an eye or you've died, by, some accident or disease or something throughout the great plan of redemption, however it is, war, whatever it was that puts you into Sheol and where you've fallen asleep, all will go through this moment. We are not going up in our current physical bodies. Alive or dead is basically what he's saying here. We are heading for the Bema Seat of Messiah. This is the first resurrection. This is very important because there's something that doesn't have a hold of these people or they're not subject to if they're part of the first resurrection. What's that, Michael?
A second death.
Yep. If you're a part of this first resurrection, according to the word, you are not subject to the second death. And the second death is real. You'll lose your eternal life. So even though this might not be torture chamber God, that doesn't mean that our very existence is unable to cease. Scripture is clearly teaching that it can. And so those who think they just die and that's it, and it's over with, when I die, that's it, nothing exists anymore. Well, for those who have rejected Messiah, have rejected their Elohim, have rejected the Creator, that is exactly what they're going to get. They will lose the opportunity of eternal life. They have chosen death. Mike, I'll get you to read this in 1 Corinthians here. This is interesting what's going on. And Paul's
Each one's work will become manifest, for the day will disclose it, because it will be revealed by fire. And the fire will test what sort of work each one has done. If the work that anyone has built on the foundation survives, he will receive a reward. If anyone's work is burnt up, he will suffer loss, though he himself will be saved, but as only through fire. And it's critical that we understand that this is not a salvation judgment. This is a rewards or losses judgment. Paul makes it very clear, if anyone's work is burnt up, he suffers loss, but he himself will be saved. So there's still life there. So this is actually the judgment of, the quote unquote believer for what he's done in this life. There is a day of reckoning, shall we say. Even, it's not just, right, I've got my golden ticket, in I go. We must all face this at some point.
And then John on the island of Patmos brought this to even greater revelation in the sense of the seven kahal under the chiastic menorah structure here of the overcoming position. Because if you're overcoming, there is a reward promised. And so what we were going to have later written by John on the island of Patmos for when these words were spoken and written by Paul is you were going to have this position of, wait a minute, there's an overcoming position. So what Yochanan was saying on the island of Patmos is he's going, if you overcome, there is a reward, and these rewards are being revealed in the revelation of Messiah, and they're quite incredible if you understand the 7 of them. We're not here to go through that today. We're doing judgment, but we can do a reward series. But right now we're understanding the judgment part of it. But it's important that we understand that we can suffer loss. And so there's a picture here of there are going to be those who didn't reject their salvation, but perhaps didn't prepare their garments. And is there a bride being selected at the Bema seat or the rewards judgment or Yom Teruah, the actual fulfillment of it, this purpose of him gathering for this great biblical judgment?
I see you've put the parable of the talents there as well. And it's, I encourage people, go read the parable of the talents, that it's servants within the household that are being judged. It's not those outside of the house. Now, Elohim only has one house, and it's called the house of Israel. And it turns out that there's going to be some servants that are going to be well rewarded. Others will be, there will be weeping and mourning, shall we say.
Well, it's quite interesting when you get, how the Apostle Paul understood the parable of the talents, the words of Yeshua. Like, he understood this. And so he's reflecting it in his own writings, And so that's what I got it in there. But absolutely. It says here in the bride judgment, for we must all appear before the judgment seat of Messiah, so that each one of us may receive what is due for what he has done in the body, whether good or evil. You mean we're all participating in the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, Michael? What's going on here? So we can actually do good and evil, one that can bring life, the other that brings death. I mean, we're looking at a Bema seat judgment here, and we're all must appear for it. So again, we have the statement of the Moedim of Yom Teruah going here. This was very much the language which they understood and spoke. It's understanding the great plan of redemption and what these appointed times were all about. And this is direct reference to it if we know what we're looking at in this reference.
To anyone who's new maybe in the community, it may seem like we're making some rather bold statements, but I want to assure people that, we're building upon arguably previous teaching series that we've done, Curtis, So I would recommend to maybe someone who's maybe struggling or going, where are you guys getting this from? I would recommend the Bitter and Sweet series, and both Curtis and I's teachings on biblical prophecy, where we really hone in on the Moedim and, the biblical language surrounding these things. Then you may have a clearer understanding of why we've come to these conclusions that we have.
And every year when you honor the Moedim or the appointed times, we are supposed to declare these things and do that. And so I purposely make the point, especially when we get together for Sukkot every year, the Feast of Tabernacles, I teach on the framework of the Moedim. So that you're actually, why? Because we're declaring it, we're learning. We're supposed to revisit these things every year. It is a part of the learning process. And every time you do, you think you know what it is, but believe me, the Ruach continues to, doesn't he? He continues to reveal, and he builds up, and he understands, and we are commanded to do this. He doesn't say, I want your teachings to all be about, 6 steps to a successful, business. That's a goat. He's actually saying, would you please focus on the reason why you're gathering and teach these things, revisit them, do that. And so I make a point of doing that instead of bringing in all sorts of other agendas, which we sometimes see in ministry stuff that can come in and creep into these things. So, we purposely make the point of, no, when we gather on these things, we're going to speak about why we're gathering, why the Father gave it as an appointed time, what it means, where it's going, so that he may reveal his truth in spirit, so that it leads us to understanding this whole great plan. Now, the nation's judgments, we do have a whole series devoted to this, but Mike, I'll just get you to quickly read this, and then we'll reference people to the Bitter and Sweet series here.
When the Son of Man comes in his glory and all the angels with him, then he will sit on his glorious throne. Now, the throne is a symbol not only of royalty, but also of judgment. Remember, in part 1, we were covering Solomon sitting on the throne and doing this diakrino and krino. Before him, before him will be gathered all the nations. This is not the believers, this is the nations. Now, where do the nations dwell? On earth. And he will separate the people one from another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats.
Now, this is interesting. There's a lot in this. The point we're making is a part of the great biblical judgments. We believe that what is coming down here, what we're going to enter into, is to the ram sheep, actually would be the better way of saying it, and goats judgment. And this is on the return of Messiah. We're actually seeing the fulfillment of Yom Kippurim or Yom Kippur. And so he's returning with his bride according to the revelation of Messiah. And the high priest is actually going to be a part of the actual fulfillment of this great Moedim, this appointed time, which we are to consider every year as a part of our faith and to understand that. So there's going to come a point where this one is literally fulfilled as well. But you must, for him, in order to come and arrive with his bride according to the revelation of Messiah, he must have selected her. And of course, now it makes sense what's going on at the Bema seat back at Yom Teruah 10 days earlier, right? And so we need all of these things to understand how this works as far and from a Moedim perspective. We don't need to be making this up. So if you want to know more about the ram, sheep, and goat sort of judgment here, part 2 of the bitter and sweet series is where you'd want to go for that. There's a lot in that, and hopefully that will help provide a little bit more. Okay, so this brings us now. So we're working our way through the chiastic structure. We're working our way through these great biblical judgments, but we're going to get to this, last great day, this 1,000 year. He has a bride. We've gone through these major judgments, and the end of the last great day, Michael, apparently ends in a great white throne judgment. Now, this is really interesting. What's going on here as far as the Moedim plan? Because even the last age, the last day, the last 1,000 years on earth is going to end with a great biblical judgment.
And I would argue that that's another Yom Kippur, personally, which is interesting when, what will the last great Sukkot look like, Curtis?
Well, this is important too, because in Hebraic thinking, it's not been there, done that. Just because something is fulfilled literally in the appointed times does not mean the significance of these things aren't being built upon. And so it's quite important. So I very much agree. I put it this way. It's hard for me to conceive that the great white throne judgment will not occur, as the time domain comes to a close on Yom Kippur. Okay. That doesn't mean Yom Kippur was not literally fulfilled by the high priest 1,000 years earlier in the time domain. And so it's important that we understand, we start to think Hebraically, psychically, all of these sorts of things. But our Greek thinking is, okay, well, it can only be this, can only be that. No, it builds upon itself, just like very significant dates prophetically, where the spring Moedim will play a big part in some of the things that we're looking for prophetically as we come to the end of this age. Just because they were literally fulfilled by Messiah 2,000 years ago doesn't mean that suddenly those dates don't have future significance as we start seeing the plan built upon. Does that make sense, Michael?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So we got to get away from this been there, done this or whatnot, and get more into that ancient Hebraic thinking. It's very difficult because we weren't raised that way. Anyway, I'll get you to read this from the great prophet, Isaiah.
In that day, the root of Jesse, who shall stand as a signal for the peoples, of him shall the nations inquire, and his resting place shall be glorious. In that day, Yah will extend his hand yet a second time to recover the remnant that remains of his people from Assyria, from Egypt, from Pathros, from Cush, from Elam, from Shinar, from Hamath, and from the coastlands of the sea. He will raise a signal for the nations and will assemble the banished of Israel and gather the dispersed of Judah from the four corners of the earth.
Now, the point we like to make here is that notice who's doing the gathering, Michael. It doesn't appear that this is a religious denomination or movement or people getting in rubber dinghies and paddling over across the Atlantic and Pacific and the Mediterranean and whatnot. Apparently, there's the root of Jesse is doing this gathering. This is the Netzarim. This is relating to the seed line or the birth line of Messiah. So just so everyone is clear, the great prophet Isaiah is saying that this is going to happen to the four corners of the earth, but know very, very clearly who he says is doing the gathering. What say you, Michael?
Well, we like to attribute, this is something they'll use this passage for the greater Exodus. And again, it's Messiah that's doing this. And if you understand the biblical terminology, when is the regathering of his people? I only read of one, Curtis, that Messiah does. The one where all will hear his voice. You're speaking full Moedim language there, if you know what you're looking for.
Yeah. And if we know that he's not playing around and he doesn't plan on doing things twice or three times or whatever, we might do our things and have our interpretations and our religious dogma and our doctrines and whatever else it is. But if we're honest, the Netzer, this root of Jesse, is going to come forth. And the result of this is going to be the bridegroom, the Messiah, the king, is going to gather from the four corners of the earth. And so this is very important that we don't run ahead and try and interpret things or leave out things, to do this, that we stay within that structure and keep building the picture. So we don't get into here a little, there a little type territory, which was the warning in Isaiah. Revelation 19:15, the Rabdos in Greek, Shevet in Hebrew. There's an assured ruling staff that's going to occur during this. What's going on here, Michael? It says, from his mouth comes a sharp sword into which will strike down the nations, and he will rule them with a rod of iron. Gee, this sounds harsh. Has Messiah turned into the wielding, smash people over the head with a bar of iron? Shall we take our Greek interpretation? He will tread the winepress, the fury, the wrath of Elohim Almighty. So there's going to be something serious that's occurred from the wrath of Elohim upon the earth. And now he's going to take over, but he's got this rod of iron. The word there, the Shevet in the Hebrew, this ruling staff. What's going on here, Michael? And in the Greek, obviously, it's using the word Rabdos.
Well, what I would ask people is, how is iron made? It needs to be smelted, and then it needs to be beaten into shape, and then it needs to be dipped in water while it's still hot, and then it has to be polished. Again, what's this typology of? Are we not to be refined, cleansed with water, maybe whacked upside the head a few times?
It's a very interesting word to use there, the Rabdos, which is the equivalent in Hebrew of the Shevet. Why use that if it's not a beating stick? You could use other words.
Well, like you say, it's assured, but it's being tested by fire. It's not going to break. Like back in the ancient world, iron was almost, I don't want to say indestructible, but it was making a point.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. There's something assured, something that's been tested, something that's for the purpose of ruling. And he's going to bring this forth to deal with the nations. Interesting. Has this assured scepter experienced something that allows it the position to do so? Again, we can get into some of the other teachings around, around the Moedim every year as we look at things like, what occurs at Sukkot and in the sheep and goats nations judgments, if you want to know more on that. But this is where we're going here with this. Matthew 25:21. So this is where now things are going to start to get interesting. His master said to him, well done, good and faithful servant. You have been faithful over a little. I will set you over much. So very clearly here in this parable, enter into the joy of your master. Now, this is really interesting that we're dealing with the parable again, go into the bitter and sweet series, but you'll be able to see, but a statement's being made here in the parable here that's being used of the wicked and the faithful servant. there's a little that's being mentioned here. So in the now, in the physical, in our experience in the time domain, Elohim considers this the little. So whatever we think we're doing here is not the big thing. It's saying this is where the rod is being fashioned. This is where it's being tested. This is where it's being done. Is that right, Michael? Is that how you were reflecting it?
Yeah, absolutely. And I really like the Luke counterpart to this parable, because it states that the reward given to the servant is rule over, X amount of cities. You gain 5 talents, have 5 cities. You got 10 talents, have 10 cities. Like, what is Yeshua? He's pointing to a governance here, a governance that will rule the earth.
It's a ruling component. Who? And there's the statements to the bride, I will grant you to sit with me on my throne. This ruling statement that is given to the last of the overcoming in the structure that is given in the revelation of Messiah. So this is really interesting. The great white throne here, and I've got second death. So Michael, what we're going to do now is we've gone through and we've laid out these great biblical judgments so people can get them. It's all pointing to Messiah. They coming down, and we're looking at this. And now we end up with these 2 branches here. And we started with the creation and the first death, with what we saw with Adam and in the garden and all of this. And now we're finishing with this great white throne, and it includes this thing called the second death. So we've got this interesting in the chiastic structure. I got 1 and 2 sitting there on either side. And this is quite an interesting connection between the first and the second death, eternal life or eternal destruction. What is going on here? These are pretty big in the sense of the great biblical judgments. And so this is why we've gone through this journey, because we need to start to not only get an understanding of where some of this righteous judgment is coming for, but also its purpose, because we're going to end up at the end of the 1,000-year reign. Arguably, we believe it will be on Yom Kippurim or Yom Kippur, but there's going to be an event called the Great White Throne in Scripture, and it's going to involve something that goes as serious and as far as eternal destruction. And this is as far as we can go in the time domain on the things for which we can inquire of Elohim, to seek out the things that are hidden.
I would also argue that you've got here that the first judgment, was a creation judgment. I would say that the great white throne, the final judgment, is a creation judgment as well. Both heaven and earth will be judged. So you again, the two branches are linked together through this fact of it's all creation. You get these statements of every knee shall bow, but all in the heavens, all on earth, all under the earth. I mean, this is the whole cosmos.
Yeah. The Aleph and the Tav, the Alpha and the Omega, the beginning and the end, the actual bookends as far as the great biblical judgments. And this is why, the menorah structure is the picture I believe Elohim chose for us in which to have the discussion around, because it keeps us in this place of getting this. Indeed, it is a creation judgment, a complete one, a final one, because we're heading out of the time domain after this. The plan of redemption and this, period, the 7,000-year period or 7-day period of great plan of redemption will come to its end, because time comes to an end as a physical property. And so it's done its job. So what was that all for? When we have a look at this, and this is very important, I got something here called the programming cycle. And we speak about this earlier, but Mystery Babylon does this as well. Okay, so the world experiences this in all sorts of ways. You'll notice mainstream media. But, and all your political institutions. But what they do is they go into a programming site and our educational institutions. And what it is you have the message that then leads to the cognitive dissonance. You take on that message, you take on your learning curve. And then, of course, we give you the confirmation bias of what you've learned is true. And then you're back to the message and you go in the circle round and around, and it's creating a programming cycle. Now, this is actually happening. I got a quote here from Dr. Matthias Desmet in relationship that we're seeing something that he identified as mass formation psychosis, okay, that is occurring over society in relationship to how people are dealing with this whole vaccine thing and everything else. And fear is driving from this programming narrative that's going on. And what we're ending up is a very divisive, very divided society as a result. This is all serious psychology measures that are going and being done. So I stand back and go, well, okay, you don't have to have everybody involved with this, Mike, on an individual basis. But if you were God of this world and you know how the human design works and you got some fingers on some key players, could you create a mass formation psychosis or get the programming cycle into society regarding the vaccines? But here's where we're going with this and why I'm mentioning it. We don't stop to consider that Mystery Babylon is doing the exact same things. And the false prophets and teachers and the messengers from within the religious system have been doing this same thing the whole time. The human design hasn't changed. Nothing new under the sun. This is just modern language, message, cognitive dissonance, confirmation bias, programming cycle. Okay, 2,000 years ago, they didn't talk like this. It doesn't change the truth of the design and the psyche of the human creation. And Hasatan knows it. So we can call this whatever we want, this process. We can put whatever name as that relates through the ancient eons and ages of history and whatever way we would refer to this process. This is just now we're at the end of the age. And here's our modern way of discussing something that is ancient. And Mystery Babylon has been doing this to us. So our very way to view something like the great white throne, is it possible, Michael, that through religion, we've been programmed to look at this whole thing certain ways through the whole message of through religion, bringing our spiritual cognitive dissonance, looking for our itching ear confirmation biases, and we can just live our religious denominations and go round and round and round we go. Is that possible?
Well, of course it is. If not, we wouldn't have the slide up. And one of the reasons we've got the slide up is, because we've laid the foundation now, really. What we've been going through thus far is the foundation to what we're now going to be moving forward. And some of it, not that it will rattle your cage, but some of you may experience cognitive dissonance. And one thing that Curtis and I have discovered in putting this teaching together is that actually this programming cycle may have even affected some of our Bible translations, because we have these ideas in our head and, you're looking at the original language and then you're looking at what we've been given in the English and you're thinking, hang on, something's not right here. And none more so with the Great White Throne Judgment.
Well, it's, I've had over the years when people say to me, oh, I've got this great commentary Bible and da-da-da-da-da. And I'm always, the red flag goes up, commentary Bible. Yeah. And I've had people say to me, Curtis, you should make a commentary Bible. I'm like, no. I'm in enough trouble as it is. It's like, why would we go? It just freaks me out, the thought of that. Yet there have been major commentary Bibles, not just the English transliterations, but then we get the commentaries on top of that. We get our Christian Talmud, and man, these things have led to some crazy stuff. Anyway, so now we're going to start to go into and now start this journey over the next part next week and the one after, where we're going to start to go. This is kind of interesting because if we can get rid of our cognitive dissonance, our confirmation bias, our religious journeys from Mystery Babylon today, we can start to look at something very interesting that is founded on the Word, that is founded on his Moedim, that is founded on his great plan of redemption, not all our religious doctrine and dogma. Mike, I'll get you to read this.
Passing alongside the Sea of Galilee, he saw Simon and Andrew, the brother of Simon, casting a net into the sea, for they were fishermen. And Yeshua said to them, follow me, and I will make you become fishers of men. And immediately they left their nets and followed him. Okay, so we've got the crazy blue-eyed blonde-haired hippie, as I mentioned, our modern day Jesus, and they just thought he looked cool, and they gave up their livelihoods and everything and ran after this weirdo walking down the beach. Or we have a recognized rabbinical Hebrew idiom going on here from a recognized rabbi position, and they're getting an honor
of something being said to them. And in the rabbinical traditions, this is what they would do. They would say to their Talmudim, come follow me. I will make you fishermen. And you would spend up to 15 years in the traditional Sanhedrin sort of rabbinical system. And at 30 years old, you would start your ministry. This is why, there was no missing years of Yeshua. He was doing his rabbinical fulfillment in the traditions of the time. But at 30 years old, you would start your ministry and you select your Talmudim and they walk with you. And then you share with them, and then eventually they would come. And to get to a Talmudim selection process, you'd go through your bar mitzvah and then your midrash. And if you were found worthy through the midrash, this is where the rabbis would select you. Well, all the disciples here around the Sea of Galilee were not good enough for the system. But Yeshua comes along and says to the ones that weren't good enough from the religious system, he says to them, come on, I'm going to go. So this was a great honor that was going on here of huge significance. We don't have time to get into that one. But this ultimately come follow me is built on Elohim's pattern, okay? Elohim's design cycle, responsibility, accountability, and consequence. This is what he's going to do. He's going to take them through this process of disclosing, all right? Because he's about to face the great biblical judgment, the number 4 we've already spoken about. But now he's going to take a Talmudim that has been raised in the Hebrew culture, it's been raised in the Torah and the Tanakh, and he's now going to start to show them some things here of what Elohim's going to do. And it's going to come down to, and he's literally come to live this, responsibility, accountability, and consequence for what he has created. But he's now going to relay it to them in a way that they understand, Hebraically, biblically, all these sorts of things. And when you start to get this kind of thinking, you start to see a lot of the folly of our modern Western culture and all our various little denominations, be it in Hebrew roots, Messianic movements, or be it in Christian movements, and even modern Judaism. We've all got these part truths, but to sort of bring it all together into what the actual disciples were experiencing is quite stunning. And for us to even ponder and to give thought to this and to get all the noise in our head out and just to allow the Ruach to show. And this is the journey, what you fight for when we do what we call a swim. We're literally going, just get the noise out. And what is it saying? Father, what are you doing? What is, not our religious dogma. And so you seek answers to these things from the swims, from the journey of discipleship, and from, and then it must be confirmed in the witnesses, in the word, with the others. It's not just a feeling or God told me so, or I'm sitting there and going, God came to me yesterday, and now I'm going to say something that scares everybody, or something like that. And no way to discern, understand. And in fact, the interpretation of it would only be from the perspective of the hearer. And this kind of stuff actually is not helpful, and it's not wise. And so it's important that we stay with the more sure word as we go through the process of revelation. Well, this is what Yeshua was going to do. They were, what did all the disciples have in common that he was selecting was not good enough for the education system? They had all been raised in something, Michael. They all knew something much better than we do. And what was that?
The scriptures, which at the time would have only been the Tanakh, what we would call the Old Testament.
And this is where it gets interesting. So we have all these so-called dumb fishermen and whatever other occupations that are sitting there that we love to say, they're all way more educated than we are. So anybody who's claiming to be whatever scholarship they have on earth, you're not coming close to these guys. Yeshua is choosing those which maybe the system wouldn't take, but that didn't mean that he wouldn't. And it certainly didn't mean that they weren't aware of the Torah and the prophets. They were. And so this is where we don't want these misnomers. This was their foundation. And so interesting, the revelation that was going to be given to them was built upon the foundation of the Torah and the prophets. And yet today we think we can just skip this. I don't need any understanding of the Torah and the prophets. I just get revelation. I get revelation from my imagination. And let's create a denomination. And then we just live in this space, this religious space. And we're in trouble. Now, there is something interesting here in Revelation 3:21. The one who overcomes, I'll grant him to sit with me on my throne, as I also have conquered and sat down with my Father on his throne. Now, this is the overcoming to Laodicea, and one of the worst mentioned in the seven kahal in Revelation. What is interesting here is that if somebody is sitting down with them on his throne, Michael, what is this denoting by virtue of something we're about to talk about?
A plurality that implies more than one person on that throne.
Now, Revelation 20:11, the revelation of Messiah. Then I saw a great white throne and him who was seated on it. From his presence, earth and sky fled away and no place was found for them. Now, let us be very clear. This is not any of the biblical judgments we've spoken about to date in the chiastic structure that we're showing in the menorah. This is not the bema seat of Messiah, the rewards judgment. This is not the sheep and goats judgment. This is not, obviously not the judgment that our Messiah was willing to take upon himself. It certainly can't be the garden or the flood. So we're looking at the last judgment here, and there's something interesting that's going on here, Michael, because this part of Revelation seems to be confirming earlier at the beginning of Revelation in the chiastic structure, just within the book itself, the revelation of Messiah. There's a plurality here. I'll get you to speak to that.
Well, when you actually look at the Greek, the words him are not actually in the Greek. Like, what you have is a preposition, and it's the verb. When you understand construct, like, it's the verb that denotes this who the preposition is. Now, this preposition can be translated singular, but more often than not, it's actually used in a plural sense in the scriptures. And this is one of these things. Remember what I said earlier, that sometimes we have a religious idea already in our heads. And I said that sometimes I believe it's affected our English translation. So there's this thing, are we seeing a passage in scripture where the translators are looking at something and they're going, well, this has to only be Yeshua because only Yeshua is doing the judgment. What if they're missing a foundation to their faith while translating this? And we have to admit that a lot of our English translations, come from places where maybe they've forgotten or not correctly applied the foundation of their faith. And this was one of these passages that, Curtis says to me, Michael, go look at this, check this out. And now comes the thing, if what we're suggesting that there's actually a plurality, so I saw a great white throne and those who were sat on it, from their presence, earth and sky fled. People may be getting some cognitive dissonance now.
And this is why we had Revelation 3:11 there before it. This isn't being built upon imagination. We either believe the word in the revelation Messiah that says, I will grant you to those who overcome to sit with me on my throne, or you don't believe that. You can either allegorize it and spiritualize it and go into your wonky doctrine, or you can just believe what it says it means. And if that's the case, I have no idea why in the very book itself, it would now give a singular instead of the plural when the book itself is starting off with that it's going to be a plural. So it doesn't make sense, basically, is what Michael and I are saying. If we are to talk the book of Revelation of Messiah, we have plurality and singular that is not matching. If I wanted to attack this, I'd go, well, wait a minute. What's happening here? Because apparently the revelation is that something's going to be granted to sit there on it. Oh, well, that means this according to my religious doctrine. What is it saying? And then if I just build upon that, where does it go? And so this is where we're going to ask the question now. How far does this really go? And is there other witness? Is there a way for us to understand this? And if so, how important would it be if it involves matters of the second death? This is going to get sobering, and it should be for all of us. We've been playing in this religious space, but that doesn't mean the religious space has been reflecting his truth. And so this is what we're looking for without going here a little, there a little. We are going to take the structure of the very book of Revelation itself and go, wait a minute, is there a disconnect here? Or was it the religious understanding of the actual English transliteration that couldn't understand what was being said?
When I'll fess up here, but when I used to read Revelation 3:21, I will grant you to sit with me on my throne, we automatically assume, oh, well, that's speaking of the millennial reign. It's speaking of the millennial reign. And then you get to this passage we've just read in Revelation 20, and it's hinting at a plurality. When Curtis says, how far can it really go? Can the bride sitting on the throne go as far as the great white throne judgment?
And what we're going to propose, and we're going to look at very seriously next week as we start to get into this, there's also the question, not only could it, but quite possibly must it. And so there's some things here for us now to consider very seriously as it relates to the plan of redemption and his word, not our religious dogma and vain imaginations. Because the seriousness of this, I know for me, and I know for Michael one, it brings reverence to him who sits on the throne. It brings repentance. It lets you understand more of who he is and why he's doing what he's doing. Because there is a judgment coming that involves the second death. What is he preparing in order for this to be righteous? One of my favorite scriptures here, Michael, the glory of kings. It is the glory of Elohim to conceal things, but the glory of kings to search it out. The word here, glory, again, is kavod here. This is from the Proverbs of Solomon, the wisest man. What's going on? What did he know? In the Hebrew, this splendor, this honor, this riches, a weightier matter. Very interesting. A weightier matter. Glory, reputation, reverence. And yet, this is the Greek equivalent of the doxa, the judgment, the opinions, so on. What is happening here? In Proverbs 84:11, it says this, for Yah Elohim is a sun and a shield. Yah bestows favor and glory. No good thing does he withhold from those who walk uprightly. This is in context of blessed are those, get this, in the Proverbs, Michael, of those who serve in the courts of Yah. Now, this is interesting. It's directly the glories related to the courts of Yah. And in that will also include judgment. Now, this is fascinating. The kavod there, again, is being mentioned. What is it that Solomon is talking about from a king perspective? Now, remember that what we were saying, what we entitled this part there, the glory of kings. What did the wisest man to have ever lived, a king of Israel, the son of David, the Netzarim, the Netzer of the seed line to the Messiah, to the throne itself? What was he reflecting? Because to use the words like sun and shield, this is a go forth position. This is where you're actually able to move forward. You're literally going to blind the eyes of your adversary, of your enemy. You're going to shield with truth. You're literally going to push forward with something that Yah is going to bestow upon you. He's speaking in a language of conquering. And we miss this. In Luke 8:16-18, now it gets interesting. No one, after lighting a lamp, covers it with a jar or puts it under a bed, but puts it on a stand. Whoa. Isn't this just a nice analogy that was going on here, Michael? What's Luke talking about here in the Gospels?
Well, we assume they're talking of these tiny little oil lamps, parable of the 10 virgins, but actually the Greek is pointing to something else, eh, Curtis?
Oh, very much. So what do we got here? Because it's saying candlestick, lamp, candelabrum. Do you know that this is the word used for the lampstand in Revelation? Now let's just put this in terms. No one puts it on a stand so that those who enter may see the light. Now we've got this coming into the holy place, which the menorah would light up in the tabernacle. And of course, in the tent, it's lighting in front of it. Now this is getting fascinating here. He's speaking temple speak, and we don't even know this. For nothing is hidden that will not be made manifest, nor anything secret that will not be known come to light. Take care then how you hear. Those who have eyes to see and ears to hear. It's interesting. Take care how you hear, for the one who has more will be given, and the one who has not, even that he thinks that he has, will be taken away. This is interesting. Paul went on to say, make sure no one take your crown. Statement of bride, of overcoming. The same thing is being said here. This is fascinating. No one that is preparing her bridal garments will cover this light on the stand of the kahal, so those who may see it. Nothing is going to be hidden. You mean this is a direct statement of the overcoming of the bride? And he's using temple speak to say it. In other words, nobody preparing their garments is going to snuff this out, because it's an overcoming position that's going to light all these hidden and manifest things. It's incredible what we actually are seeing. If we know the ancient language and what they spoke to. I'll get you to read this.
Yet among the mature, we do impart wisdom, although it is not the wisdom of this age or of the rulers of this age who are doomed to pass away.
The age. So if it's not of this age, and we're already now in the last days, we're already now in this part, what age is left? If they're already started that age and it's not of that age, there's only one age left. What were they making the statement of? What was the wisdom for?
And it's linked to rulership as well. So wisdom that's needed for rulership in an age to come, it's starting to smell of the millennial reign.
We're starting to see something going on here. You mean there's going to be, and there's a plurality according to the revelation of Messiah that's going to sit on something. Ooh. Okay, we're going to be finishing up here. In 1 Corinthians 2:7, it says this, but we impart a secret and hidden wisdom of Elohim, which Elohim decreed before the ages for what? Our glory, doxa, or the kavod in the Hebrew equivalent, for our judgment, whether good or bad, concerning, resulting in praise, honor, righteous judgment. Wait a minute. What's going on? For whose? Ours. The word there being used, secret, there is mysterion in the Greek, a hidden thing, a secret, a mystery, the religious secrets confided. So we impart this, okay, and hidden, the apocrypto or apocrypto. Look at this. What is this? To hide, concealing, keeping secret. Do you mean there's going to be a component within all of this that's going on, that's being given in that age, starting, we're going back 2,000 years ago, that is going to be for the purpose of the final age to come. And this wisdom is going to be delivered during this time. Something is coming for the purpose of judgment. In fact, it infers here in the glory under the doxa, righteous judgment. So what understanding did the disciples have? John 17:22-23, the glory that you have given me, I have given to them. Who's speaking here? This is Yeshua as a high priest, Michael. He's about to be betrayed. Listen what he says. The glory that you have given me, I have given to them. The doxa that you've given me, the righteous judgment you've given me, I have given to them, that they may be one, even as we are. Oh, a plurality on the throne, Michael? Is Yeshua actually saying something here? What's going on?
And I believe he's speaking marriage, covenant language. I mean, when you read, John 14 through to 17, there's so much wedding analogy in this. So, you've
Massive.
got judgment, glory. Yeah, exciting stuff.
So this isn't just, big bad judge God. You mean there's an actual picture of a covenant spiritually occurring, and he is selecting something to do something with them? And look at the point. And could this be all headed for righteous judgment? Is he making his judgment righteous by the very act of the selection of a bride? I in them and you in me, that they may become perfectly one. So that, look at this, the world may know that you sent me and love them as I loved you. Do you mean there's an age coming that is going to demonstrate love from the throne? Is it possible that there's going to be something that Elohim is preparing so that people may witness something? And this is all a part of his righteous judgment? In 2 Timothy 2:10, it says this, therefore I endure everything for the sake of the elect, the chosen. Look at what Paul's saying. I endure everything for the sake of the chosen. And they also may obtain the salvation that is Messiah Yeshua. What? With what? Eternal glory. He's referring to the chosen, the elect, aka bride, for their eternal glory, doxa, righteous judgment. Now, this is interesting. Paul makes the point throughout his epistles that he did not consider the trials of his life worthy of the reward he knew was coming, including prison. And in fact, he was writing this from prison, I think, at the time. So this is interesting. Paul got something to such a level that he did not even include the trials of this life being worthy of what he understood this to be. This is staggering. So we're going to finish here. Let's think about this for next week. How does Elohim provide a righteous judgment? Let us ponder this, because what is coming, as we come to the end of this age, I believe we're in an incredible time where he's allowing us the chance to have these discussions for the purpose of our repentance, for the purpose of our garment preparation, for our understanding. This is an important thing for us to do. Why the Ruach is pouring forth this exactly as prophesied in Daniel. We're getting a glimpse, I believe, to understand something that Paul knew intuitively 100%. And he spoke, and it was often difficult for people to understand, especially 2,000 years ago. But what this man understood, his understanding of where this was going and what it was so great that he did not consider the trials of his life worthy of the reward and the task that was coming. That's how reverent he was with it. Okay, let's finish up there. And let's...
add one thing as well. You've said to people ponder, how does Elohim provide a righteous judgment? I'll also say ponder on this. How do you get a whole cosmos to accept that righteous judgment of their own sovereign free will?
We'll put that we'll stick that in there while we can. What would it take for his people to declare it? What would this really be? Where they will accept his plan of redemption in its fullness without cheating? What would be required for love to be made real and keep sovereignty intact as a result? Has religion robbed from us an understanding of not only how sovereignty and love works, but the reverence for our Messiah? Is it possible, instead of Yehuda for thousands of years, over the last 2,000 years, and our Christian brethren, to both have the same thing in common? They both take his words out of context. Is it possible because both were seen partly? And so the reason why they're taking it out of context is not because that's their intent. Is because until we have certain things understood and revealed that maybe Paul had. And this is why it is silliness for those who do not understand what Paul was actually saying, what he knew. He spoke from a position, and in our swims, he spoke from a position that is staggering. And modern day little movements and cliquey little cults and groups that don't understand the level of what Paul understood does not put Paul on the stand. It puts us on the stand 2,000 years later. And it's for us to go to the Ruach and for his word and to cry out for an understanding and discernment of these matters, not throw Paul under the bus. This is folly to even think we're anywhere near what understanding this man had. He's considerably ahead of the curve. And as I said, Michael, do you ever get the sense that this man knew how to wield a sword with precision accuracy?
Absolutely. As Hebrews says, right, the sword cuts between joint and marrow, dividing soul and spirit. And man, Paul he knew where to aim that sword.
He did. Okay, let's finish there. And let's go grab a coffee, go to the washroom, whatever you need to do. And we'll come back here in a few minutes and go through a quick question and answers on this.